cold night. I remember it like yesterday. The wind howled ominously outside, the icy tendrils of the night air creeping inside through the small cracks in the walls. I was working in my parents' old shop, a relic of a bygone era, you know, the kind that stays open late into the night, providing an oasis of light in the darkened streets. It was a quaint little shop that was a patchwork of various shelves and counters, selling everything from canned food to car parts. The aisles were lined with dusty cans of beans, boxes of cereal, bottles of soda. On the other side, there were shelves of car parts, stacked high, each one labeled meticulously with a small handwritten tag. I was there alone, just me and the flickering fluorescent. Their sterile light cast long, distorted shadows on the walls, creating a macabre tapestry of shifting shapes. The hum of was my only company, its low drone a comforting background noise in the otherwise dead silence. The floor was cold beneath my feet, the worn linoleum bearing the of countless footsteps. Something about that night felt different. It was more than just the usual quietness. It was a tension that hung in the air, a stillness that felt almost palpable. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. A chill ran down my spine, like sprightly fingers tracing an icy path down my back. I shrugged it off, blaming it on the late hour and the eerie silence that had made a home in the shop. I busied myself with restocking shelves, the rustle of plastic and the clink of glass providing a brief respite from the quiet. Then, the above the door chimed. The sound reverberated through the shop, its metallic ring echoing in the silence. A man walked in, his face hidden beneath a hood. His silhouette was eerie, his posture menacing. He paced around the shop, his footsteps heavy and slow. He made his way through the aisles, his eyes meeting mine. But I could feel his gaze. It was like a weight, heavy and oppressive. I could feel my heartbeat quicken, each thump echoing loudly in my ears, creating a symphony of fear with the humming refrigerator and the flickering lights. He finally approached the counter, his hands hidden in his pockets. His voice came out as a low growl, like the sound of dragging gravel. "Pack of cigarettes." The words hung in the air, their harshness cutting through the silence. I handed them over, trying to avoid his gaze, my hands shaking slightly. He took them, his cold eyes finally meeting mine. They were piercing, almost predatory, and I felt like a prey caught in his sight. He left without another word, leaving me shaking behind the counter. The echo of the closing door lingered in the silence, its sound a harsh reminder of the encounter. I leaned on the counter, my knees weak and my heart still pounding. I tried to shake off the fear, the eerie feeling of his gaze still lingering in the air. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, he began to frequent our establishment. His visits marked by the late hours of the night, always devoid of any companion. It was as if darkness was his only ally, the solitary presence that kept him company. He was a man of few words, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. The he uttered were as measured as they were sparse, but each occasion of his appearance, his gaze seemed increasingly hostile, his aura growing more ominous. His eyes were deep pools of darkness that held an unspoken threat, staring at me with an intensity that cut through the silence of the late hours. His stare was a predator's gaze, cold, calculating, filled with a dangerous promise. Each passing night, his presence cast a sinister shadow over me, the dread growing, threatening to consume me. The fear, like a hungry beast, gnawed at me relentlessly, casting a pall of terror over my nights. Every evening after closing up, I would brace myself his arrival, the prospect of his visit sending chills down my spine. The fear had its icy grip around me, squeezing the life out me. And then, one night, he didn't show up. The anticipated terror gave way to an unexpected sense of relief. It was as if a heavy weight was lifted off my chest. My heart, which had been beating erratically, began to slow down. I thought maybe his ominous visits had come to an end. Maybe he had found another haunt. Perhaps he had moved on, leaving me to my peace, setting me free from the terror I had been living in. But just as I was reveling this newfound tranquility, just as I was letting my guard down, a noise shattered the silence. It echoed from the back of the shop. I froze. Every cell in my body screamed danger. My heart hammered against my ribs, threatening to burst out of my chest. Slowly I turned around, each beat of my heart deafening in the eerie silence, hitched in my throat as my eyes found him, standing in the shadows like a phantom. There he was, a silhouette in the dim light, his presence unmistakable. He took a step forward, his eyes glinting menacingly in the weak light. Each instinct within me screamed at me to bolt, to flee from the impending danger. But I wouldn't obey. I was rooted to the spot, frozen with terror. His footsteps echoed in the empty shop as he took another step, then another, closing the distance between us. His cold stare bore me, a predator scrutinizing its prey, sizing up its next meal. The air grew thick with anticipation, threatening to suffocate me. But then, in a turn of events that left me reeling, he simply turned his back to me. With slow, calculated steps, he walked away. His departure, as sudden as his arrival, me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. His presence lingered, a ghostly reminder of the terror that had unfolded, leaving me shivering in the aftermath of his visit. Despite the relief of his departure, his absence was almost as unsettling as his presence. The shop was once again silent, but a different silence. A silence that held the promise of his return, a silence that echoed with the ghost of his presence. Yet he simply turned around and walked away, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. From that night on, I never worked alone. I always had someone with me, a friend, a family member, anyone. I never saw that man again. But the fear, the dread, it stayed with me. It still does. That's my story. It's real, it's terrifying, and it's a reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't the monsters under our bed, but the ones walking among us. If you've made it this far, I hope my story has given you a glimpse into the darker side of life. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, do subscribe to my channel. Stay safe, and remember, you're never truly alone.